So let's talk about the battle line of the greater good. The very scary fire warriors who have the serious potential to move 24 inches within a transport, jump out onto an objective, and then one-shot a dreadnought. Underestimate these humble pulse weapons at your peril. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Tau, and we're going to do a fairly in-depth review of fire warriors, the core troops of the faction, and one of the ones with the most combos in the whole book. The standard fire warriors' pulse weapons were looking really quite underwhelming in their previous codex, but as with just about every other unit in the book, they've got a massive improvement, massive extra damage output, and some very handy army-wide special rules. We'll start by talking over the datasheet for the Strike team and Breacher team, talk through a bunch of options for getting more out of them with buffs and synergy, a couple of ideas for some hefty damage dealing combos, and a few thoughts as to practical use in game. Loads to talk about, so let's jump straight into it. So fire warriors are of course a troop's choice for Codex Tau Empire. You either get to choose the Strike team or the Breacher team. They're essentially the same unit though. The only real differences are the weapons that they carry, a small points bump, and access to a different stratagem. Games Workshop chose to make the unit size very inflexible in the new codex. You have to have 10 of them now. It's 80 points for Strike team and 85 points for the Breachers, though you can still add some drones and turrets if you want. They're a trooper's choice and have objectives secured, and keywords wise they have everything you'd expect. They're Septs core infantry, and they also have the fire warriors and photon grenade special rule, which allow access to a few other things like stratagems. Role wise they're basically competing with the Kroot mercenaries to beat your troops. Their base stat line really isn't too bad for the 8ish points: 6-inch movement, weapon skill 5+, ballistic skill 4+, strength and toughness 3, 1 wound, 1 attack, leadership 7, and a 4+ armor save. Obviously being Tau they really don't want to get caught in close combat. The unit's Shazwi gets +1 attack and +1 leadership. Really though, the exciting bits are their guns. The Strike team gets the pulse rifle, 36 inches now, rapid fire 1, strength 5, AP -1 and damage 1. It's a really good generalist profile. It should wound most everything on at least a 5+, and the AP means that it's not useless against armoured targets. It's only really any sort of efficient damage dealer though if you're in rapid fire range. The Strike team can swap out theirs for the pulse carbine. It loses that useful AP for being a 24-inch range gun with assault 2, and in my opinion it's basically a flatly subpar choice right now. It's got really niche brackets where it actually does better than the pulse rifle, and Montcar can allow the unit to do advance and shoot anyway. I'd basically always take pulse rifles if I was taking a strike squad. If you really want a fast-moving, hard-hitting close unit though, you really want to go for the Breachers. Their pulse blasters are pretty terrifying up close. Within 8-inch range they get 2 shots at strength 6, AP -2, damage 1. That's going to be massively more efficient against certain toughness and save profiles. Anything with toughness 5 and a decent armor save is going to fear these a lot more than your strike squad. And if they can't manage to get into that very close range bracket, they can still get 2 shots at strength 5, AP -1 out to 14 inches. In general for the two, I'd say the Breachers are usually your jump out of a devilfish and kill something unit, where the strike squad are the unit that you want for holding down objectives in your deployment zone, or maybe bullying into the midfield on foot. Both variants also get a pulse pistol as well, meaning that if you get locked up and you don't want to fall back for some reason, you can put out a little bit of close range firepower. Options wise, the squads are both fairly straightforward. The unit's Shazwi can take a marker light for 5 points, seems reasonable enough if you do want to hide away one more marker light within the unit, though for just 5 more points you could take a marker drone. I think that's probably the better option. It means that you don't lose out on the Shazwi's weapon, and you get an extra body in the squad to absorb fire. Speaking of which, you get up to 2 drones in the unit, any combo of 2 of the marker shield and gun drones, and you can have up to 1 guardian drone for 10 points within the squad, which is one that's fairly unique to the fire warriors. Essentially a 1 wound shield drone with a 4+ invul save, and gives the unit an interesting wound rolls of 2 fail against this unit rule when they're targeted by ranged weapons. If you do want to make the squad a little bit more durable, it certainly isn't the worst upgrade. The wound rolls of 1 and 2 fail thing will be genuinely handy against any strength 6 or above firepower. The 4+ invul could be good to tank a high AP shot, though I would bear in mind that you are making the unit less efficient as damage dealers by including it. Seems handy enough, but by no means mandatory to get the job done. Putting marker lights within the squad I think does give them some slightly conflicted priorities. Due to marker lights being in action now, they're going to stop you from being able to advance while using them, so it could mess with their movement priorities a bit. Finally, you get the option to take a support turret, basically another fire warrior profile that hits on force. This little drone turret is basically a boost to the unit's firepower while it's stationary. You deploy it as an action that you can do instead of moving. You plonk down a turret that for 10 points has a smart missile system, or for 20 points has a missile pod, and the next time the unit moves it basically gets packed up and put back in its box. I guess if you're absolutely certain that a Fire Warrior squad is going to be sat around stationary, say holding a home field objective, I think the Smart Missile system is actually quite a good deal for 10 points. The Missile Pod seems a bit pricey at 20 though for me, but I do feel it's a bit of a take or leave unit upgrade even for objective camping units. A lot of the time I think you might get a bit more value from repositioning slightly, rather than just firing a few more Smart Missile shots down range. I certainly wouldn't be taking this on the breaches, it's at complete odds with what they do. Overall, they're both solid little firepower units. They can get far better when they're buffed with the decent options available. Besides the Pulse Carbine, which I don't particularly like, all the other upgrades do seem at least somewhat usable, depending on what tactical role you want the squad to fill. So how can we get a bit more out of the Fire Warriors then? First up, as with any Tau firepower unit, getting a marker light is going to make them hit a bunch better. If you think a squad is maybe going to be doing the slightly more traditional Tau thing of just sitting around in your deployment zone and taking pot shots down range, having one marker light hidden within the squad could be kind of handy to make them self-sufficient. Even an unreliable chance to get that 3+ ballistic skill is usually going to be worth it for the points. Perhaps equally helpful, if not more though, are the tactical philosophies. Montcar and Cao Yon work really well with these guys. Both unit variants do maximum damage at fairly close range. Montcar's boosted mobility with advanced moves and extra AP really helps both variants. It's absolutely great with breaches. Getting those pulse blasters to a very scary strength 6, AP -3 and re-rolling ones to wound is a really nice combo. Cao Yon I think is pretty much equally good as well though. Fallback and shoot is really handy, as are the exploding 6s, the main drawback being that you only get it turn 3 onwards. Character wise, as the core troops choice for the army, Fire Warriors can get all sorts of different buffs, though for most of the buffs that can actually target battlesuits, unless you're absolutely committing to spending a bunch of CP to make the Fire Warriors more dangerous, most of those buffs will be better served buffing massive units of crisis suits or broadsides. Certainly any one unit buffs that you can put on are generally going to have more effect on a unit that costs 300+ points, as opposed to an 80-odd point unit of Fire Warriors. Running through a few of the options, the reroll ones to hit from commanders could be situationally useful, but I feel that they have lower priority compared with those other units. If you actually want an aura buffing character, probably the Carter Fireblade is the better one. Getting an extra hit on rolls of 6s is really quite powerful, plus you can also make one unit reroll 1s as well. The Ethereal can help out their leadership with their leadership 10. The invocations are absolutely great and certainly could be used on Fire Warrior units, but compared with putting a 5+ feel no pain on crisis suits or broadsides, it just doesn't really compare. Darkstrider is also particularly good with on-foot infantry. It allows them to fall back and shoot so they aren't going to get tagged as easily, and his +1 to wound buff again is great on everything, perhaps particularly so on these guys with their fairly low strength, again though probably more effective on suits. Several warlord traits can be kind of handy, through Unity Devastation for extra AP on 6s, exemplar of Montcar for reroll wounds up close, and through Boldness Victory for 6s to hit auto wound. Again, all good on Fire Warriors, though you might have better targets. Finally, out of the relics, a couple of things seem specifically really quite good for Fire Warriors. The Multisensory Discouragement Array could give you a good chance to remove Auspex from certain units. That could be a nice 1-2 punch with fast moving breaches jumping out of a Devilfish. And I feel that the Puretide Engram Neuro Chip is particularly helpful on an army going heavy in Fire Warriors. You get to refund Epic Deed and Battle Tactics stratagems for 3+, and a lot of the best Fire Warrior buffs are in that Battle Tactics section. It just means that you could be a bit more trigger happy in using those damage dealing stratagems without feeling too bad about draining your CP as much. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure that any of these character buffs are enormously necessary. They can do what they do really quite well unsupported, though I must admit it could be really quite intimidating to have a Carter Fireblade with a whole bunch of strike teams in your deployment zone, potentially a very scary force for repelling enemies. For transports, I think that Devilfish are going to be really popular with Tau players. It's pretty crazy that during your tactical philosophy you can have one command point to disembark 3 different units from the Devilfish. So move 12 inches, get out 3 inches, potentially move and even advance with Montcar for even further threat range, hopefully getting on objectives, and then delivering a point-blank fire of pulse volleys to kill the enemies that were there already. If you want to add just a little bit of insult to injury, for one command point you can nominate one enemy unit, and the Devilfish gets a fun aura of reroll 1s to wound against that one target for Fire Warriors nearby. As an alternative kind of transport, it could use that Tidewall shield line for 80 points for a sort of medium tier defense unit. It can slowly glide your Fire Warriors towards the battle with a bit of protection. The enemy has to chew through the fortification before they can kill the Fire Warriors themselves. It's not particularly fast though, and I think that people are generally going to use Devilfish, particularly while that stratagem exists. Septs wise, as the army's default troops choice, they're all pretty much somewhat useful. Tau Septs could be handy for getting them in range of big auras. They get a single reroll, which is kind of limited effectiveness on pulse weapons, but really I think the biggest value for Fire Warriors is accessing that +1 to wound stratagem for 2 CP. Really good on mass low strength fire, and one that you could potentially share with multiple different units of Fire Warriors at once. Viola, I guess, could be handy for mass Fire Warriors moving forward turn 1, getting a bit of extra movement. They add yet another damage boost strat to the mix as well, having the chance to get mortal wounds on 6s to wound. Though it is a touch pricey at 2 CP and does cap at 6, I guess it could combo quite well with that 1 CP one for breaches to reroll wounds though. Sakia get dense cover at range greater than 12 inches, quite nice for Fire Warriors hanging back, and they do have an ignores cover stratagem as well, which could be handy. Delith makes them a little bit tougher with light cover at range. Borkhan gives them a 4-inch range boost, which is pretty handy for the breacher's small profile. Getting that out to 12 inches is really quite nice. And Farsight Enclaves are quite a nice one for jumping out of Devilfish. That automatic marker light on units within 12 inches will really help bring the pain, and an extra wound roll doesn't hurt either. Out of the custom Septs, quite a few of them are theoretically useful. You could get +1 strength on your breaches within 12 inches, theoretically strength 7 AP -2 small arms, which is pretty hilarious. There's one that gives pulse weapons a buff where they get extra AP on 6s, a kind of weak upgrade, but it would apply to quite a lot of situations. One can give you dense cover if you're within area terrain, and one can give infantry a 6-inch pre-game move. Not bad on Fire Warriors on foot, as they're relatively slow. In general though, I do think a fair few are pretty handy, particularly Borkhan or Farsight Enclaves look like they work well with breaches, maybe Tau Sept being a good one for strike squads perhaps. Stratagems wise, I think the main takeaway is that there's just loads of ways to increase the Fire Warrior damage output, but again within context of the army, I think it is usually going to be a mistake just to dump literally all of your CP in making your pulse rifles shoot a bit better. You do have to weigh that up against other really powerful options, things like having your battle suits jump shoot jump, or other offensive and defensive buffs for your really big damage dealers. I think perhaps one of the single highest value though is that 1 command point breach and clear one for breaches. It allows the core models in the unit to ignore cover, and also allow them to re-roll wound rolls with their guns, making a full squad really effective against just about everything, whether or not you're a tank or infantry. Instead of that, strike teams get Relentless Fusillade, that allows them to fire their pulse rifles twice up to 36 inches, and also get an AP -1, so their strength 5 AP -2. Could be good if you've got a big squad and they're the only things that can deal damage to an enemy unit at long range. Otherwise there's Pulse Onslaught, 4 6s to hit auto wound the enemy, good against hard targets. Point Blank Volley, if your Fire Warriors get tagged in close combat, that allows blasters, rifles or carbines to be counted as pistol too. That one is really quite powerful situationally, and could be a good deterrent against your opponent just tagging them in combat to mess with their firepower. Coordinated Engagement allows 2 units to focus down 1 enemy unit, and all of them gain an AP -1. Good on both, but particularly relevant on strike squads with less AP. And finally Photon Grenades, which are a really handy defensive stratagem, giving non-vehicles a -2 to charge, and also -1 to hit when they get in close combat. That one's particularly nice if the enemy is trying to charge you out of deep strike, makes the charge really unlikely to go off. Overall, a whole ton of options there. I think perhaps Photon Grenades and the Breach and Clear might be the highest value out of any of those, but basically just in general, Fire Warriors are going to do better if you've got some command points spare for combos. Here are just a couple of theoretical damage dealing combos for what these guys might achieve in game. First up, just for an example of what breaches might achieve jumping out of a Devilfish. 95 points for the Devilfish and 85 points for the breaches makes it 175 points overall, plus 2 CP for the combo. The idea is to use the stratagem to move the Devilfish, disembark the breaches. They can then move and Montcar after that for an extra advance. So theoretically those breaches could be anywhere up to 24 inches from where the Devilfish started, and have a further threat range of 8 inches from their close range guns. Then a support unit from the backfield will throw a marker light on the target. They'll use 1 CP for breach and clear to re-roll those wound rolls, and it all adds up to 20 shots at strength 6, AP -3 with Montcar, damage 1 shot, hitting on 3+, and re-rolling wound rolls and ignoring cover. That adds up to around about 13 dead guardsmen, 5 dead space marines, and around 6 wounds to a toughness 7 or 8 vehicle that don't care about -1 damage whatsoever. If you're determined to fry a hard target, you could even add that 1 command point stratagem for 6s to hit auto wound. That should add up to an extra couple of wounds against a vehicle, meaning that these guys could very easily add up to killing a dreadnought in a single round of shooting. Pretty crazy for that points cost and an Auspex unit, even if it is going to eat a fair few CP. For mounting a bit of a counter-attack, here's just a bit of theory about a couple of strike squads defending an objective with a card of Fireblade nearby. Here we've got 160 points for 2 strike teams in Montcar, though that's not taking into account the Fireblade. If they're advancing with Montcar though, then that's going to be 7 to 12 inches movement, then plus 18-inch rapid fire range, so at least a 25-inch threat range for each model, 1 command point for that coordinated engagements to make the AP all -2, and it might get up to -3 with Montcar if the unit's closest and within range as well. So if the Fireblade can get close to them, then they get 40 shots at strength 5, AP -2 or 3, damage 1 with exploding 6s, and they're likely going to be re-rolling 1s to wound, either from Montcar or from the Fireblade giving 1 a command phase buff, even not accounting for the Fireblade's marker light. That adds up to 21 guardsmen, 7 or 8 toughness 4 space marines, 8 or 9 wounds to a toughness 7 or 8 vehicle, and of course would get a bit more efficient if you could have the squads hitting on 3s with marker lights. That adds up to really quite a powerful counterpunch if any enemies try to invade your deployment zone. Hopefully just the basic troops can handle the situation, while the big guns still focus on the core of the enemy army. So how does all of this look for actually including them in a Tau army then? First up, I think that most armies are going to want some cheap troop fillers. Patrols are really quite good, as a lot of armies are going to want more than one commander, and patrols are a great way of achieving that with limited CP. For that role, it's either between them and Kroot. If you just want minimum investment, Kroot are a bit cheaper at 60 points rather than 80, but they also do have worse armor saves and definitely worse firepower, even if they are a very efficient unit and get some decent countercharge and that helpful pre-game move to screen. I think there's arguments that you can make for both choices. I'm going to have a feeling though that a fair few optimised lists might still go for the Kroot over the Fire Warriors for that role, just because 60 points doesn't detract from your other strategy, and having that pre-game screening move on offset models is really quite a nice combo. Still though, as we just talked about, having a unit of Fire Warriors in the back deployment zone to hold down your objective doesn't seem the worst thing. They are more than capable of batting away a fair few enemy threats. I think probably the single most competitive use of Fire Warriors is going to be a Devilfish Fish of Fury style tactic. 2 or 3 Devilfish moving into the midfield laden with breaches, seize those objectives, shoot dead whatever was on them, and then next turn there's a good chance that the enemy will probably kill them back. That really doesn't seem like the worst thing though. Better to have that to your cheaper troop units compared with the core of the army. In general though, I think outside of that combo, I don't think that you're generally going to see loads of people spamming masses of Fire Warriors and Tau lists. Games Workshop do seem to be fairly good at keeping troops at the sort of level where they can do some damage, but maybe aren't quite as exciting as the elite units and the heavy guns. So if you are looking to build some mega damage combos, generally crisis suits or broadsides are going to do that better. I think Fire Warriors can be fairly good if you spend a few CP on them, but probably the bulk of the command point support is still going to want to go into those big units, as it's just going to have more effect, even if the buffs that you can put on Fire Warriors are really good. Overall though, I do think that Fire Warriors are a strong, flexible and interesting troops choice. Their base damage output is pretty decent, and a lot of really quite nice stratagems that could easily give them big advantages over the enemy rank and file. I think they fill their role very well, and we will see at least some play with them in competitive Tau armies. So let me know your guys' take on the Fire Warriors and Breachers then. How are you planning to use them on Tau lists? Are they good enough to get the go-ahead over units of Kroot? As always, I look forward to hearing all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I've already looked at a fair few other Tau units, including the Crisis suits. Feel free to check out the other videos on the channel, and I'll certainly be hoping to get a fair few more Tau videos out in the near future. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention one way in which you can help support Auspex Tactics, and that's my Element Games affiliate link down in the video description below. Element Games is a UK-based discount retailer. They usually give 10 to 20% off Games Workshop's miniatures, and if you do order anything after clicking the link in the video description, a small amount goes to help support Auspex Tactics without costing you any more. Can be a good way to help out if you were thinking about picking up something anyway. For people over in the USA, there's also an Amazon link down there as well. Again, that works very similar. Click on the link, order literally anything through Amazon whatsoever, and a small amount goes to help support the channel. It doesn't cost you any more if you do so. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.